record this session starting right now. All right. So welcome to our virtual coffee with the principal session. I think I muted myself. Today's purpose of this session here is to let you know where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. We've had a lot of changes over the last 10 months. For those of you who have joined these sessions before, we shut down almost 10 months ago to the day. I know things have been crazy ever since, and we've been navigating through a lot of challenges and continue to do so. But we're in a much better place than we were then as far as how we're educating our kids. This is our 14th virtual coffee with a principal session that we've had. First one being March 26th. And as we brought our kids back to campus, we've had additional sessions. For those of you who've been with us through all of this, I thank you. Thank you for your partnership. It's input from some of these meetings that enables me to make sure that you're informed of what we're doing, but probably equally important, if not more so, is to get some feedback and input from you so that we do make the best decisions for our kids. By way of review, we started bringing kids back to on-campus learning the day after we were permitted to do so from the state. And we started mid-August, and we brought back some special needs students, some kids who had language needs. We were able to bring back our primary students, TK, K, first grade in September. And then in October, we brought back second and third graders early in the month, fourth and fifth graders, middle of the month. And then we were finally able to bring back our middle school in November. So for those of you who've been on these before, you know that our mantra is generally the same. We value having kids here at school. We feel that for most students, it's the best environment for them to learn. They are served best academically, socially, emotionally. But we also understand that coming back to school right now isn't the best decision for all kids. And so our goal has been to have a quality program that we could offer here at school to capture those benefits, but also have a quality program for students that choose to stay home, because there's some legitimate reasons in families for kids not to be on campus. We've also had a mantra that said we'll continue our in-person learning as long as it's safe to do so. Safe is a very subjective term these days. And as we've kind of moved through this, it's really about risk mitigation. And, you know, the world is not a super safe place at the moment, but there are things that can be done, and a lot of things that can be done in a school environment to make it safer, to address some of those risks, to address some of those concerns. We're never going to eliminate them, or at least not in the short term, but we can address them on our side. And we really appreciate the cooperation that we've had from our kids and our families in doing that. The screenings in the morning, I know it takes longer for you to get going, but we appreciate you bearing with us on that. Sending kids to school with masks and encouraging the masking behavior. I know when we started this process, that was a very big debate as far as whether kids could do it, would do it, should do it. And we've really moved on from that point to get some science information that shows the value of it. And thank you for supporting that. We also are focusing here at school, as you guys know, on distancing and barriers. And so when kids come to school, we do our best to keep them 6 feet apart. When they're in the classrooms, if they can't be seated 6 feet apart, we put barriers in between them to promote their safety. And we've added additional staff and cleaners and equipment and all sorts of things to clean, disinfect, and sanitize here at school. We also are emphasizing, and this creates some challenges in some areas, and I know it has for some families here, on cohorting and quarantining. So we try to keep kids in stable groups throughout the day to minimize the risk of exposure. And then if there is some level of exposure, and we'll kind of get into those steps with you in just a moment, we have smaller groups so that it becomes limited and much more easier to address without school-wide shutdowns. And we've been very fortunate to this point of being able to operate since we started rolling students back to school with relatively few cohort shutdowns because of some of those things that we've been doing and because of what you guys are doing at home. I've sent out some messages encouraging safe behaviors within the community, because the safer the community is, the more likely we stay open. So I really do thank you for that. Moving on to our next section, I'll give you a little status update. At San Pasqual right now, we have about 80% of our students that are currently receiving instruction on campus. So about 4 out of 5 kids are coming to school each day for on-campus learning. By comparison, in San Diego County, about 20% of public school students are doing so. So we really are in the minority, and some people commend that, and some people are a little bit worried about that, but we are in the minority of being able to provide on-campus learning for our kids. And it's a testament to the folks here at San Pasqual. You know, it starts with our school board and our leadership of our school board. You know, they really recognize the importance of kids learning at school and have prioritized that. They were eager for us to move quicker than we did. But part of our slow, staggered approach was to make sure that we could do this in a way that prioritized safety as well as on-campus learning. I also want to commend our teachers and our support staff here at school, especially those that came in the early phases of this. This is a novel coronavirus, meaning people are learning about it on the fly. And we had a really large ask of our staff to come back to school and teach kids at a time when there's a lot of unknowns. And that still continues to be the case. We have a high infection rate in San Diego County and the state and the nation. And our teachers and our staff still keep coming to work. And I really commend their passion and their focus for our students and their bravery for doing so. You know, it is a testament to who they are and why they're here. And I also wanted to commend you guys. This has been a long journey. And as I mentioned before, I appreciate you partnering with us along the way. And we've gone through a lot of what ifs and why and when and how. But I think we've gotten to a point right now where, and I'll talk to you in a moment, that things change quickly. I think we've gotten to a point right now that we are able to get our kids into school. They do feel safe while they're here, and we've had relatively few negative impacts to our campus as a result. And I also want to thank your kids. Your kids have been awesome. The highlight of my day, honestly, is greeting them in the mornings and getting them onto campus. The excitement for learning is palpable here at school. You rarely hear middle school students talk about how much they look forward to going to school, because it's just not cool to do. But we're seeing that here at San Pasqual. So commend your kids for that as well. Like I said, though, the regulations and requirements, they have been ever shifting. Ever since day one, we've had new things. Just yesterday, the state added 30 more pages to school regulations under the guise of bringing students back to school. And I'm not sure I understand the wisdom of adding more restrictions to get kids back to school. So I won't comment too much further on that, because I try not to make these overly political. But we will do our best to sift through that and make sure that what we're doing here is right by our kids, and that we continue to move forward in a way that, like I said, prioritizes our students and our students' learning while taking the steps that we need to keep them safe, or at least mitigate the risks that we're addressing. Instructionally, as you guys may or may not know, depending on your age of your kids, we ended up landing on 2 different programs for our elementary school and our middle school. So our elementary school is essentially, when we were working through this process early on, and we were looking at, okay, how are we going to educate our kids on campus and how are we going to educate them home? We were leaning in a direction of having 2 separate programs. And you guys and our teachers made it loud and clear that they did not want students separated from their teachers. And that is a testament to our teachers and the relationships that they've built and the relationships that they built with you. And so that program, as it evolved to a point that our elementary teachers are teaching on-campus students in the morning, and they're teaching their virtual learners in the afternoon. And that has actually worked really well. It's quite the burden on our teachers. It's a difficult thing to be teaching 2 different modalities and not have access to all kids at all times. But our teachers have really stepped up and done a commendable job balancing that situation. It does create some challenges. Like one of the questions that we had in here was, hey, what's it going to take to return elementary to a full day schedule? And our goal on this has been a slow staggered approach to get back to, and we'll put it in quotes because I don't know if it'll ever be normal again, but kind of get back to our normal schedule. In elementary right now, we have, like I said, about 20% of our kids that are learning through distance learning, and they deserve to have a quality education program as well. And so one of the reasons that elementary gets out around noontime, a little bit after 12:05, 12:10, is because those same teachers take a lunch break. They still get a break. They take a lunch break and then they hop on the computers again and start serving our distance learners. So it does make it so that in order for us to get at least a couple hours a day with their teacher, that is that current focus in elementary school. Middle school is slightly different. Middle school program is one in which the feedback that we got is that our students were more capable of doing some independent study. And there was an emphasis on, hey, let's get the maximum amount of time, instructional time that we can in our core areas, because we're concerned that our middle schoolers, some of them who will be going to high school very soon, need to be prepared. And they've been out of school for too long. So the middle school schedule is slightly different. They get out a little bit after 1 o'clock on our regular days. And what that does is it allows them to have nearly a full day of instruction. There's only 1 hour of asynchronous learning, and that tends to be things like online PE and some extra type stuff. So that our middle schoolers really are focused with their teachers up until 1 o'clock each day and nearly paralleling a regular day. That brings up another question that we have from parents, and I know, let me just go back real quick. The distance learners for middle school are learning mostly independent study in their content area. They use a program called Edgenuity. It's the same program that the high school district and a lot of the charters, online charters used for instructional delivery. But the big concern we had about our middle school students who were learning online was social emotional, peer connections, and so forth. And so there are twice daily interactions. There's a required homeroom in which all students get together who are learning through distance. There's social emotional curriculum that's being taught during that time to try to keep those kids connected, because that was one of the big pushes that we had for getting students back here. Is we wanted to make sure that if kids aren't here at school, how are we supporting them in their social emotional needs? And it's a big deal. So we do dedicate that each and every day. And then in the afternoon, there's another check-in for instructional support for students who need it. But that does bring up the next question that we get. And parents who have students that are elementary kids and middle school kids are like, come on, why can't you have pickup at the same time? Like, you're killing me here, especially folks that don't live close to the school. And we know it's a huge challenge. The reason that we haven't been able to put those together, initially we had staggered release planned so that we could distance kids, so that we don't want all kids standing out in front of the school and mixing together. And that's why you see the K1s getting picked up in one spot, and the kindergartners picked up in one spot, and the first graders in a different one, and the 2 through 5 all spread out on the playground, and you see the middle schoolers spread in different lots. That's to try to keep kids distance while we dismiss them. And so we did have a plan for staggered dismissal, but not quite this far apart. I know, when you kind of look at an hour between dismissals, it's too long to stick around and too short to go home, kind of a thing, or the other way around. But the challenge we ran into was the competing instructional needs. And that is, we can't keep our elementary any longer and still serve our distance learners properly. And we don't want to short our learning of our middle schoolers to accommodate pickup. So that's the challenge there. And like I said, I wish I had a better solution for that. Another question that came in is, when are you going to bring back Kids Club? Can you provide some sort of after school thing, or can you provide something during that time? And the reason that we've curtailed our Kids Club is because of cohorting. The challenge that we run into is, as I mentioned before, is we look to keep kids in relatively small, stable groups to prevent them from being exposed. And if there is exposure, to prevent the school-wide impact. So that if we can keep kids in small groups, then if there is an impact, that's those small groups that are affected. And so the reason that we've curtailed our after-school care is that it takes these kids that for 90% of their day, all of their instructional day, they stay cohorted, and then it mixes them together. And so from a health standpoint, that's the reason that we've curtailed that. And it'll come back as we get to a point where the cohorting is less necessary, and that's going to be when there is less of a risk of spread. We'll look to start bringing back some of that after school care. And it's also likely to be the time that we can start extending school days. Because another thing that we were looking at is if we had kids stay the full day, had them stay through lunch, so to speak, how are we going to be able to get them to have their lunch, which inherently has masks off, and still keep them distanced and not mixing cohorts? So that's kind of the reasoning behind there. It is not to make your life more difficult. Our goals in this has tried to understand that life is difficult enough. And so we are trying to do the things that we can, but that's the reason why we weren't able to get there on those others. We did have a question about positive cases. And the question was really, how do I know if there's a positive case here at SPU? And I'm going to ask Mrs. Hansen to drop our dashboard into the chat. And so we do have a dashboard, which is cases related to San Pasqual Union. And I'm just going to bring it up. Actually, I'll bring it up here and I'll share it with you guys. Let me do that real quick. And I'll kind of tell you what it is and what it means and how we utilize it. So let me share this quickly if I can pull this off. All right, so hopefully you are seeing this. This is on our school website. To navigate to here, if you go to the home page of our website, and on there you'll see this little link on I want to learn more about, and you click on COVID dashboard. What it does is it talks about how San Pasqual has been impacted as far as COVID-19. And if you look at it, it tells you a couple things. It breaks it out per month. And what it does is it says how many kids were on campus that month. That's one thing that per the health order, we have to report to them. And so this information's reported to the health department so they know what we're doing here. And as you can see, since we started school on the 19th of August, we had that small high needs group that came back early. And as I mentioned before, we gradually progressed. And so you see that we have been able to have more and more students return to campus as we've moved through the months. And if you look, we had no impact, meaning we had no students, no staff members that had COVID infection up through October. And we started seeing our first cases at the end of November. As you can see, we had 4 cases in November, and all 4 of those are non-school impacted. And so on this column, the difference between a school impacted and a non-school impacted case is the school impacted cases mean there was somebody who either was positive for COVID or presumed positive for COVID that was on campus. And so because of that, it has impacts in quarantining and follow-up. And so those first 4 cases, we had none, meaning that there were students or staff that contracted COVID, but were not on campus during an infectious period. So it really had no impact to campus. When we started getting into December and into January, you can see that we have more cases, and we've had a few of them that are school impacted. So we had 2 cases at the end of December and 3 cases in January. And typically what happens in those cases is the students that are considered close contacts, which by definition from county health is within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, are instructed to quarantine. We, as a school, have really looked at that and said, you know, if kids are in a cohort together, we know that when they're seated in class, they're either 6 feet apart or there's a barrier between them. But we also know that as they're kind of navigating that cohort, we keep the same cohorts together when they take a snack or when they go out for recess or when they have any other activities. But we can't say with certainty that kids have not been within 6 feet for 15 minutes cumulatively. So it could be 5, 5, 5. And so what we do out of an abundance of caution is if we do have an individual in a cohort, positive or presumed positive, that's when we do our quarantining. And so the quarantining, and I'll get to that in just a moment, is the, hey, you got to stay home for a while and we'll kind of let you know when you can come back. And we know it's extremely disruptive, especially for folks that have their own schedules going on. But I'll explain to you in just a moment why we do that. But this is where this is. And people ask, when is it updated? I can tell you that the number of students and staff on campus, that gets updated every 2 weeks when we report it to the health department. And all of these numbers here that have to do with the positive cases get updated as soon as we get them in. And so we had the last thing that we had to revise was early part of this week, but we will keep this up to date. The other question that's related to this, and I'm going to stop sharing this screen right now. The other question that's related to this is, hey, if I have a kid in my, if a child in my kid's class tests positive, are you going to tell me? And that's a little bit tricky. And I don't mean tricky and deceptive, but it's a little bit tricky. If it's a non-school impacted case, meaning the child is in your kid's class and they contracted COVID over Thanksgiving, they haven't been on during an infected state, then we would put it on the dashboard, but there wouldn't be a notification specifically. Where the notifications would come to you individually would be if you were in that cohort class and that student was on campus during as COVID positive, either presumed COVID positive. And how that rolls out is what we do is we send out to you guys a spreadsheet, and I'll get to, a spreadsheet called a decision tree. And within that decision tree, I'll ask Pamela to put that in the chat room. Basically, it comes from County Health, and it tells us kind of how to respond to this. So we had a question about how do you decide who gets quarantined and for how long? And the short answer to that is we really aren't making the decision. What we're doing is determining the facts and then following that guidance. And so Pamela just put that in the chat. It's complicated, but I'll simplify it in this way. They kind of look at it in 3 different buckets for kids that could be quarantined or perhaps isolated. Students that have symptoms. And I know that Mrs. Anguiano has made many of you angry with the symptoms. There are 10 different symptoms that could be possibly COVID related, and it's almost anything that a child could get. Coughs, sneezes, runny nose, belly aches, fevers, so forth. Per county health order, students that do exhibit those symptoms have to be quarantined and can't come to school. And so I know a lot of you have had conversations. I'm sure a lot of you have had conversations that, oh, my child normally gets headaches, or, oh, it was just because of this. Unfortunately, there's only a few courses of action we can take when a child is symptomatic. And so essentially the way it goes is generally if a child presents with COVID symptoms, they are quarantined for 10 days with improved symptoms. And so it's about 2 weeks of school. It's a long time. They could come back sooner. They could come back with symptoms if in 3 days they've received a negative COVID test and their symptoms are fully resolved. That's a huge challenge because they don't accept the rapid one, and it's hard to get an appointment and results for the regular one. And so that one is usually difficult to get done within those 3 days. The final thing that can be done on symptoms is if it's a chronic condition, kid has allergies, or there is some, they get stomach aches for some reason, but it's a chronic condition. If those symptoms relate to a chronic condition, we have a note about that. Kids don't need to quarantine for that period. So those are some of the things on the symptoms one. The other way that kids could be quarantined is due to close contacts. There's a couple different options in close contacts as well. And like I said, close contacts is you're within 6 feet of somebody who's presumed or COVID positive. for 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period of time. That's kind of how they define that. And so if you're a close contact, close contacts are actually quarantined for 14 days, even longer than the symptoms. And if symptoms develop in somebody who has had close contact, they are quarantined for 10 days from when the symptom onset occurred. And it could even be longer if you're living with that close contact, because if you're living with that if you're living with that COVID positive person, it actually, that timeline starts after their isolation ends. So it really could be some significant times. Like I said, it's kind of confusing. Last thing I'll go into real quick is COVID positive individuals. So if COVID positive individuals, they are quarantined for 10 days. It's either 10 days after their positive test or 10 days past the onset of their symptoms. And so the irony of all this is oftentimes those who are COVID positive and they differentiate between quarantine and isolation. Those who are COVID positive are isolated for actually a shorter period of time than exposed and oftentimes symptomatic people. So that's kind of the guidance that we have on that. So let me get back. I see a couple questions that just popped in on things, and let me make sure I can answer it. Question is, there are already more school impacted cases after 3 days back than the month of December. These can accelerate quickly. If classes are quarantined for 10 days, what happens with siblings? What happens if a staff at the school has a child in a quarantine class? Are they continue to work? Okay, let me go into a couple of these things. I'll break down just a little bit. So I can tell you that we have had 3 incidents, all emanating from one source off campus. So the answer is yes. Those things can accelerate very quickly, and they have huge impacts. So our current case, without kind of disclosing too much detail on it, all emanated from one thing, but it had impact on 3 different places. It had impact on a preschool, it had impact on a first grade class, and a second grade class. And so all of those individuals who were in those cohorts, including staff members, were all quarantined. So if you had a class, obviously a class is going to have a teacher. That teacher would be considered close contact quarantine. If that class had an instructional aide or other supports that are in that class and are in there for 15 minutes or more, those people quarantine. And that has been some of the challenges that we've had in local school districts, in that you quickly start running out of adults if you start quarantining people who have contact with kids, because that's what adults do at school. They work with kids. And so that is a big challenge. And so I would look at those cases. They're more one incident, but like I said, they impact 3 ways. And so it really does have the opportunity to do that. There was a question about siblings in there too. Quarantining is for the person that has the direct contact with the COVID positive individual. So there is no order for secondary quarantine. So what that means is, and I can see Mrs. Lee next to me in the box, so I'll use her as an example. If I was COVID positive and Mrs. Lee had contact with me, she'd have to quarantine. But if Mrs. Lee had contact with another person, that person would not. And so this is how we kind of look at the siblings. So if we had a sibling, say in one of our first grade classes, and they had to quarantine, that individual, that sibling that kid in the class would need to quarantine, but their siblings could still come to school because they're considered a secondary contact. So the thing that we're advised by public health is that sibling, we need to make sure that no symptoms are developing within the quarantined individual, but the sibling on the secondary contact is still permitted to come to school. So that's kind of how the sibling issue works. What is the plan if a member of the front office tests positive, or one of the staff taking the temperatures of all kids coming to school? Okay, those would kind of be 2 different things. If we had a front office member, we work pretty hard in the front to keep our 6 feet. If we're outside of our office, we're masked and doing all those kind of things. But it would very likely, we'd look at the circumstances, it would very likely have the opportunity to shut down that front office. Similar things have happened in other districts with their maintenance department, their custodial staff, their bus drivers, and those have been shut down things for schools. We would have the ability to do much of what we do in the main office remotely and continue working if we need to quarantine, but that would be very disruptive. The other question was about people taking temperatures out in front of the school. If one of those persons tested positive, unless they are in close contact, meaning that 15 minutes or more within 6 feet, they would not necessitate others to quarantine. So if you look at kind of that contact, it's a very quick check-in. The fact that it's outside is a good thing. The county health office does not differentiate between inside and outside, but the science does. And so when we kind of look at those types of things, the temperature checkers would not. And at what point do you have to shut down the school and do all distance? Is there a certain number? Yeah, there is a certain number. That number right now is 5% of our school and staff population over a 2-week period. And so for us, Mrs. Lee and I were looking at that. It's about, if we had 25-ish, we'd have to look at the exact number, but about 25 cases within a 2-week period, that would necessitate our shutdown by health order. There are some other things that could come before that, and we don't believe we would get to that 25 cases before we had some more significant type of a shutdown. But that would be, that's the one line in the sand that's been drawn so far. Like I said, each day we open up our email and find out what the new rules are. So it could change, but that one has been pretty solid for a while. Let's see, moving in to some other questions. We've talked about those. Yeah, there was a question in here about the high school districts bringing back sports. Will SPU do the same? And so there's been kind of a splash lately. And it's kind of like when all the news is bad, you'll take what you can get. In the high school district, they've been shut down, and the high school has a lot more complicating factors to get school going than we do, and they've been emphasizing the need to bring sports back. And I agree 100% and wholeheartedly that sports is good for kids. And I'm glad that they're taking steps to do that. They have kind of created a matrix where they have looked at the risk levels of different sports and when they could come back, and it's all tied to the tiers. You know, we're currently in the purple tier. It goes purple tier is the worst, then you can move into red, and then you can move into orange, you can move into yellow. And so they've taken those 4 tiers and they have looked at them in a way that they are trying to bring back sports based on their risk level. So for instance, the early sport that they're bringing back is cross country, because running in the woods, mostly apart from yourself, is safer than, say, a sport like wrestling. And so wrestling's more in the yellow tier, indoors and very close contacts. And so they're looking at gauging that out. Where they're at right now is bringing some kids together for trainings, because they really don't have anything systematically set up for competition yet. So they are in their very early stages. We also prioritize kids getting back to sports. But the challenge that we have is, number one, there's nobody to play because our leagues are not going right now. And then the other two, the second piece, which is probably a little bit more paramount, is by bringing kids back to into sports, even if just to practice, we're mixing our cohorts up. And what it does is, for a school that's open, trying to stay open, it jeopardizes our ability to do so. And for a school that is closed and can bring students in, there's not a whole lot of risk to that, because they're not mixing their cohorts. And so for us, we're really looking to bring our sports back when we can start cohorting and mixing up a little bit more. When that is, keep fingers crossed that it's sooner than later. But we also would like to do it in a way similar to how the high school's doing it, as far as looking at sports that would pose less risk than others when we do that. So also a question here is, what's the school's position on vaccines? I can tell you that right now, and we're going to be having this talk with our staff soon, staff is on the verge, at least school staff is on the verge of receiving vaccines. Currently, the county is distributing them in tiers or phases. I can't remember what they called it. But we are currently, as a school staff, in the next group to get it. So right now they're prioritizing healthcare workers, as they should, to make sure there are healthcare workers who can receive the vaccine. And then the next phase of it includes educators. And we're going to encourage our educators to take it. There's a lot of controversy over it. I'm going to ask Pamela, there's a video that I just got yesterday from the fire chief in Escondido. I met with him and he shared with some other school leaders a video from the fire chief in LA that basically goes through sort of a history of vaccines, a little more science than some of you may want, but it goes into why they work, how they work. He talks about some myths around it. And really what he comes down and says is, he says, you know, herd immunity is going to be what gets us through this, and vaccinated people is going to create that immunity. And so we're going to encourage our staff to do it. That being said, there is currently no mandate requiring it be done. Like, we can't make people get it. And there are currently limited options for how this is going to apply to kids. So we don't know exactly how that is going to roll out. But for our adults on campus, we will be encouraging them to go ahead and get those vaccines as soon as they're available to do so. On a similar note, our staff does get tested regularly. So we have staff that's tested at least once every 2 months. And really the idea behind that is, number one, it's part of the requirements on school reopening. And it is designed for us to try to identify if we have any asymptomatic spread. And I can tell you to date, there's no evidence of that. So we're feeling good about that, but looking forward to the vaccines coming through. And believe it or not, we do have a couple non-COVID things to talk about. But before I get to that, Pamela, is there any questions that I may have missed? COVID-related questions? I don't see them on our notes.
No, not at this time.
Okay. Well, let me get to a couple other things, and then we can open it up if you came here to learn something in particular that we didn't quite get to, or if I confused you more than I clarified, let me know. But I want to talk about a few things that we're doing non-COVID related. We have a few initiatives here at the school. One of the things that we've worked really hard to do so far, and it's kind of been our two biggest challenges, is number one, we've tried to put only the pressure on our teachers as far as development and new things that were directly impactful to your kids' learning today. And so normally we have some initiative going on, but we have a few of those on behind the scenes. And so we have a lot of our specialists, so our school psychologists and some of our special education teachers, counselors, working on this project called MTSS, and it stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. And really what that is it's a systematic way of us identifying our structures and supports that we have here at school to make sure that we meet the needs of each and every kid. One of the things that ties into our school mission is that we want to make sure that every kid gets what every kid needs. And so as we're kind of in this phase of a restructure, which we will as we come on the back end of this, whatever it looks like, we want to have more things in place to make sure that if your kid's struggling, that your kid gets the support in a timely and an appropriate manner. Or if your kid's excelling and there's some boredom there, that we have programs in place for that. And so we're looking at putting that in place. So you'll start hearing about this thing called MTSS as we move through, but it'll be a couple years in the making, but it will start changing some of the structures and how kids are supported and some options that kids have. The other thing that we're working on is a project through the county called E3, and it's on teacher effectiveness. And so we're looking at how do we make teachers more effective, ties very directly into that MTSS project. And then the third one that's a tie-in is we're working on a data analysis project. And we gather this testing from students and we do make decisions on it. But how can we make more timely decisions and more individual decisions on what we know about a student and what that student needs. So a lot of things that are all interrelated, but they really all tie into how can we serve kids better and how can we get kids what they need when they need it. So you'll start hearing about some of those things as we move through, but I just wanted to make you guys aware that it's not all COVID all the time, although Mrs. Lee and I tend to feel like it may be. So that's that piece. And then the other thing that has been very difficult for us here is one of the things that makes our school what it is parent volunteers. And as you know, we've been very restrictive on parent volunteers, and I'm not here to say that that's changing today, but we do look forward to having you guys back. One initiative that we've put in place is we did receive a sizable grant from the San Diego Community Foundation to build out our interactive science garden. And so we have done some construction out in the science garden as far as putting in a path and an outdoor amphitheater. Still working on that right now. We've created 3 outdoor classroom spaces out there so that when kids are at school, there is more places for outdoor learning. That has been a big emphasis and will continue to do so. But if you are interested in volunteering, the garden area is probably one that allows people to be outside and distanced and so forth. So if that's your thing, let us know. We're going to start getting to a point where we start having some folks back in for selected things. We do have a handful of volunteers that are coming back onto campus right now. And generally what we do is they're screened the same way our staff is, but we do not have them going into buildings. So we don't have them going into classrooms. Whatever support that they're providing, they're doing it outside. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, keep us posted. Our goal is not to keep you away. It's always to have you here. And we're going to look to get you back here when we can. Also wanted to mention to you that we have a Healthy Kids survey that's currently out there. I'm going to ask Pamela to drop that link into the classroom as well. Healthy Kids survey is an annual survey that comes out. It is a statewide one. It allows us to compare our school climate with how it's been and how other places are. So it gives us a good indication of how are we doing on certain things as far as supporting kids' emotional needs, bullying issues, substance abuse, those types of things. And are these issues that need to be on our radar? And we'd encourage families to take it because we don't have the same level of connection that we normally do. So your information is even more important now than it typically is. The survey is also given in a student version to 5th and 7th graders. So if you haven't received it, and you probably haven't, you should be receiving soon a notice that tells you about it. It's a passive approval kind of form, meaning if you don't want your kids to participate in the survey, tell us and we won't have them do it. But if we don't hear from you, we'll have them take the survey. And then we also give it to our teachers. And then in April, we'll get this data back and we'll have an indication. Like I said, are there some areas that we really need to take a look at that we're unaware of? And how are we doing now comparative to past years? So I'd encourage you all to do that. And let me see. I don't see anything else. Let me check into the chat room real quick and see what might be on the bottom. Do we complete one survey per child? Yes. And I believe what they do on that survey is I think on that survey, they ask you to answer it based on your oldest child, but it would be one survey per child. What, if anything, is the school doing to support teachers, staff mentally and emotionally? That's an excellent question. Because as I mentioned before, we really commend our teachers for stepping up and being here. And I just said it in the context of actually just coming back. But they come back every single day and they are dealing with the same home issues and worries and childcare and all that kind of stuff that everyone else is. And so Mrs. Hernandez, who is our school psychologist and our special education coordinator, hosts monthly meetings that are designed to support mental wellness for staff. And so she has opportunities for staff to get together and be supported. And we've also have a program in place, and the name's escaping me right at the moment. Mrs. Lee, what's the program that we?
She does
signed-
the wellness circles after school for the teacher.
Oh yeah, it's wellness circles and it's Care Solace. And so
Yes.
we have a program that's open to staff. It's also open to families as well. And it's on our website. I can send it to you if you'd like. But it's called Care Solace. And what that program is, it's a program designed to connect people to the resources they need. And so what's really difficult for people, say if they're having emotional problems or their kids are having problems or marital or whatever it happens to be, these 10 months have brought out a lot of strain. What this does is it's really a connecting service. And so what they do is they have counselors that are aware of resources, and they know what resources are connected to what insurances, and they know what resources are connected to people who lack insurance, and they provide what they call a warm handoff, which is, hey, what is your issue or what do you need? Let me connect you to the resource. So there's not confidential information that you are divulging necessarily to them. It's connecting you, and when I say you, it would be parents, students, and staff, to appropriate resources. So that is something that we're happy of, and it's been used a whole lot more in this time than we've seen in previous times. So we're glad that we have that, and it looks like Mrs. Lee put that link in the chat if you are interested. Let me bring that up a little bit bigger and see if I missed anything else here.
Mark, there was a
Yes.
question about summer school and if we were gonna offer that.
That's an excellent question. So the answer I can tell you right now is it's either a maybe or a probably. And let me tell you why that is. The governor came out about a week ago and he released his January budget. So the way budget cycles work, at least for the state, is the governor comes out with a budget for the following year in January. And he says, these are all the things that I want. And this is what I want to spend all this money on. And then that gets submitted to the legislature and they fight over it for the next 5 months. And we get to May and he comes out with a May revision that talks about how the budget is very likely going to land. And as a school, we have to have our budget done in June. So we use that May revision heavily on our budgets. And then by the end of June, the governor needs to have his budget done. In this budget now, the January one, so about 6 months from now, he is proposing a significant amount of money for, and they call it two different things, but it's essentially the same thing. He's proposing a lot of money, billions of dollars, to go to schools for what is being called either learning mitigation loss or learning acceleration. I like the learning acceleration one better, but it's basically saying, hey, our kids have not received the same type of education they would have if they were in school. So even from a baseline level, you say the last third of last year, all kids were learning from home as things were being adjusted. And I believe that as a school, we did a really good job of making that adjustment comparatively, but I would say that it did not compare to what we would have provided if the kids were here. So there is that piece of, okay, how are we going to catch that up? And so the governor's idea is to provide these funds so that the school year can continue into summer school so that additional learning can happen. There's a lot that has to happen as far as funding and a lot that has to happen as far as programmatically what that would look like. And I cannot see that being a mandatory requirement, but I can see it being an option for families. As that starts to move forward, that is something I think is going to happen. And that's why I said the maybe probably, because it's a huge push, because everyone can agree right now that it's an identified need. And it just has to come down to, okay, how are we going to extend this? Because the challenge about summer school is that as wonderful as our teachers are, we don't expect them to work for nothing. And so that's the big challenge. So it's that funding source that leads it, and then we kind of go from there. So that's the summer school question. Pamela, anything else? Actually, I saw a question that just popped in.
Looks like there's a couple more in the chat that just got in there.
Great, let me take a look. Do the teachers have a wish list that some parents may be able to help out with? I'd contact your individual teachers. Teachers typically, what they've been finding, and they made an ask at the early part, and most of it had to do with supplies, because they wanted to make sure, especially in our primary classes, we used to have classrooms where it was collective supplies, and you'd put pencils in the middle, and you'd pull one out, and although there's less concern now for transmission through touch, it is still a concern. And so we don't want kids to be using separate things. So that was a big ask in the elementary school early on. I think most of those needs are met, but I would check with your teachers because they typically always have something that they're lacking. We try to provide it and make it up. But teachers are typically reaching in their pockets for things. So I would check with your individual teachers on that, but I don't have anything universally. For the kids that are learning at home, when are they able to come back to campus learning? What's the deadline to decide if they decide to return? And does school have the capacity to allow these students? Really good questions. And so that one is, and it's kind of the answer that our lawyer always gives me, it depends. And so when we kind of look at that, our plan as far as how it works out on paper is that students commit to a learning modality and they remain in that learning modality for the trimester. They can request prior to the end of the trimester to switch learning modalities, and then we make that determination. And that determination is primarily made on space available in the classes. So some classes are very full and some classes are not. And so when those requests come in, the way the process works is we look to see, is it a request that could be accommodated? And we have talked to teachers who we said, hey, this student would like to return to on-campus learning. We look at the available space and we say, hey, typically we tell parents that this happens at the trimester. Would you want to wait to the trimester or not? And most teachers in the elementary grades say, no, that student will be much better learning off with me, and they haven't come back. The difference is in the middle school. The middle school is a lot more challenging to make that switch. And middle school is because elementary, you're essentially dealing with the same teacher who's teaching the same kids the same curriculum. They're just doing it at different times, and some are in person and some are at home. And so the elementary is a much easier way to make that switch if the classroom can accommodate it. The middle school is much more challenging because they're on completely different learning tracks, meaning that what the kids are learning in on-campus learning is our adopted curriculum, like what they would have been learning when they're here. What they're learning when they are doing distance learning is through Edgenuity. So it's the same content, but it's not sequenced exactly the same way. And so it's very difficult for students to drop in and out throughout. So typically for our middle school students that are looking to come back on campus, we tell them we'll reevaluate at the trimester, because although we can't align the instructional path the same way, the trimesters end their units of study, and then you can jump into a next unit of study. So middle school, we do look at waiting for the trimester because of that reason. Elementary, we often have more flexibility if there's space. The exception to all this is if you have a student you say, hey, we have a condition at home that I don't want my kid exposed to others and I'd rather have them stay home. Or I don't feel comfortable sending them to school. I don't think that they're going to be safe. If those things come out, we're not going to tell you got to wait till the trimester. We can accommodate you moving to distance learning at any time. The ask would be that continues to the end of the trimester, in part because it's very disruptive to bounce back and forth between the two. But if you're not feeling safe, we can move you to distance learning almost immediately if you wanted to. So I hope that answers that question. Let me see if there were any others. All right. I think you guys have the ability to unmute. Are there any other questions that I did not get to, or any information or clarification that you guys would want? All right, hearing the silence, if something comes up, reach out to us. We'll start doing these things as information develops. Like I said, we got away from our coffee with the principal to do our orientations. But our goal is to continue working with you because it's a complicated situation. And the unique advantage that we have over just about everywhere else, including all those schools that are closed across town, is that we make our own decisions. You know, we do it based on health guidance, and we do it based on what's in the best interest of our kids. But we're not doing it beyond us. And so the more that, you know, I can work with our staff and work with you, we come up with our best decisions. And I think that's kind of gotten us to this point right now. And so I appreciate you guys being here. If questions come up or there's anything else that you need, please reach out to us. And like I said, we'll bump into this in probably a few more weeks and do it as long as it's valuable. But don't wait till then to ask questions. And like I said, I really thank you guys for your partnership. I know that what we ask of you, whether you're helping teach your kids at home or how to figure out how to pick them up in the middle of the day, I know none of this is easy. So I really thank you guys for it. And we are very eager to stretch this back into a big day and make your lives just a little bit easier. But until then, I really thank you guys because we really couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much. It is good seeing you. I do see the Zoom fatigue because I only see like 5 faces now. You used to have all these faces looking at me. So those of you with your cameras on, as your teachers would say, thank you very much for being here. Other than that, we will see you guys soon. Like I said, this will be posted on our YouTube channel, probably, our tech guy's not here, probably Monday. So if anybody missed it and wants to-
Tuesday, no school Monday.
Monday? Yeah.
Tuesday,
so look for it
no
to be
school
posted
Monday.
YouTube Monday. If somebody's
No.
dying for the information sooner, email me and I'll send it to them. All right.
There's no
Good
school
to hear.
Monday, don't forget.
Oh yeah, no school Monday.
Tuesday.
Yes. We'll see you Tuesday then. All right. Good to see you guys. All right. Thanks for coming. Bye.